What's up, fish friends? I'm excited to be talking about Glowlight Danios today, a truly magnificent, gorgeous fish, my favorite Danio by far. I'll cover everything you need to know in order to take care of them, set up a good habitat for them, and potentially do a little bit of breeding. Glowlight Danios are a truly gorgeous fish and a relatively small Danio, maxing out at about an inch or 2.5 centimeters. On first glance, it can be pretty tough to distinguish how gorgeous they are because of how fast they move around. I'm going to show you some still shots while I talk about their appearance, otherwise you really won't be able to appreciate their beauty because my video footage isn't able to capture it. Most Danios exhibit some sort of horizontal striping or spotting, but these guys are rocking both vertical and horizontal stripes. Starting from the top of their bodies, working down, there's a reflective silver stripe, then a red one followed by a pale green, and then yellow again, and then a big peach patch, and then back to the pale green underneath. The fins are also lined with exquisite stripes from deep red to neon yellow. Running up and down the large peach patch are green vertical bars that really only show up when the Glowlight Danios are mature and healthy. Colors often vary throughout the day, with red colors showing up strongest in the early morning and late evening when the lights are ramping up and down. They also tend to show up after good feeding when the fish are feeling happy. Dominant males tend to show the strongest coloration. Gotta get them colors to impress the ladies, if you know what I'm saying. The last physical characteristic that I want to mention are their handlebar mustaches. Who doesn't love a good handlebar stash? These are actually referred to as barbels in the fish world. It's such a cool physical feature that you really don't get to see without taking the time to thoroughly examine them up close and maybe even in slow motion. There are actually two different species of Glowlight Danios that look almost identical. Danio choprae is the southern Glowlight Danio. That's what's available in the aquarium trade for the most part. And more recently discovered and less commonly available is the northern Glowlight Danio, Danio flagrans. They are virtually identical when it comes to coloration. The subtle differences are that flagrans is slightly more slender and has longer barbels, as well as a few other small differences when it comes to the fins. You'll see the name Celestichthes choprae on a lot of online stores. That's the same fish, it's just using the old genus Celestichthes instead of Danio. Both species are native to different water systems in Myanmar. Danio flagrans can be found in rocky headwater streams with relatively high flow in the northern mountainous regions. As you move downstream towards the south of Myanmar, you're likely to see Danio choprae living off of secondary tributaries to the Irrawaddy River in streams and shallow ponds found nearby. In a scientific paper I read about Glowlight Danios, it discussed how all the specimens were collected from streams flowing through meadows and shallow ponds or pools that barely had a trickle of water flowing. In both cases, aquatic vegetation was scarce. The Glowlight Danio is very charismatic. You can see them bouncing back and forth now. That's pretty much all they do, day in and day out. They spend a lot of time hanging out under this large stump in a little cave-like area. They also like to use these passageways between the rock and wood as part of their normal travel routes around the tank. Another one of their favorite spots to hang out is by these bucephalandras growing on top of the sand. My Glowlight Danios do not spend any time swimming out in the open or by the top of the tank, which is very unlike the other Danio species that I've kept or seen over the years. They really seem to enjoy darker, dynamic areas of the tank versus bright open ones. Like all Danios, Glowlights will nip fins and need to be kept in schools of a dozen or so to be kept in check. especially if you plan on keeping them with other species of fishes. If you've never heard about the Danio rule before, the way it works is that Danios will always nip fins. If you only have a few, they'll nip other species, but if you keep a school of 12 plus, then they'll only nip on each other's fins, which they're alright with. It's just part of Danio culture. It's nothing personal. In fact, the more you keep, the better. That helps prevent the weakest ones from being singled out and continually picked on. I have about 20 in this tank. There is definitely some sort of hierarchy going on with them. There are a few more dominant males, and I'm assuming they're males, but they pick little territories to defend. They'll lash out at passerbys that they don't like, while also trying to catch the eye of a lovely female. If he does succeed in drawing her attention, they'll end up doing the little ritual dance of spinning around each other and shaking a bit before spawning at the base of some vegetation. One thing that I find interesting about the Glowlight Danio behavior is that they really don't spend any time foraging in the fish tank. Let's face it, most aquarium fish are not underfed, and mine are no exception, so it's not like they need to go looking for food, but I do think most species just kind of spend their time passing the day, poking around looking for food. It's what they do in the wild. It's just kind of how they're hardwired to work. It's what my dogs do when we're out on a walk. It's just something a lot of animals do. But I never see the Glowlight Danios doing that. Now that you know a bit about the Glowlight Danio, let's talk about setting up that perfect habitat for them. I'd recommend a 40-gallon or 150-liter aquarium as a minimum. I know that seems high. A lot of folks out there are recommending half that size, but look at how active they are. They really are a fish that likes to be active, swimming back and forth, going around objects. Give this fish the ample space it deserves, and you'll get a lot more fun in return watching them bounce around the tank. It'll also decrease the chances of them lashing out at other species. According to that scientific paper I mentioned earlier, aquatic vegetation is really not an important part of their habitat. That's maybe reflected in the way that mine behave, acting more interested in hanging out by the rocks and the wood. They're also exposed to bright light in their natural habitats, so there's no need to overdo the tank with vegetation or floating plants. That being said, there's also no harm in decking out your tank with a bunch of plants as long as you provide the fish with some hardscape to interact with. Another paper I read looked at wild Glowlight Danios and found many in larger, faster moving streams. The substrate was pure river stone and gravel, a little bit of sand with absolutely no vegetation. I do think that replicating their natural habitat in a tank with only a bare gravel bottom could be done to look good, but I do think it's worth considering that when fish are kept in a small tank, they need a place to hide. If they got startled in the wild, they could dart off to the other side of the stream or river and get away from whatever's scaring them. In an open aquarium, they really have nowhere to go, and they'll just end up slamming their heads on the glass every time they dart off. It is a smart idea to create some sort of cave-like area in the front of your tank so that you'll be able to see and enjoy your Glowlight Danios. I've heard people mention that they spend a lot of time hiding under a log in the back of the tank, but if you build your layout like this, they'll be out all the time. The Glowlight Danio is a very hardy species. Like many of the other Danios in the hobby, they can tolerate an extremely wide range of conditions, but staying within the suggested ranges is always a good idea to guarantee your fish live long and healthy lives. I get a lot of people asking and saying like, well, I keep mine outside of the range and they seem fine. You can live off of a unhealthy lifestyle for quite a long time, but that doesn't mean that you're at your happiest, and it's kind of the same with the fish. The healthier and happier they are, the brighter colors that they'll exhibit, and the more fun they will be to watch. They live in areas with proper winters and summers, so these fish can tolerate an extremely wide range. You likely wouldn't even need to have a heater for them as long as your home isn't getting extremely cold in the winter. I do use a heater and keep mine at 74 Fahrenheit or 24 Celsius, which is the temperature that the specimens were observed at from the paper I read. Another article talked about the higher limits being 90 Fahrenheit or 32 Celsius. Any higher than that, and there are serious risks to cardiac system, likely resulting in death. pH of 6 to 8, it's pretty typical range for headwater streams. The sites they were studied at had a pH of 7.4. When it comes to mineral content, GH and KH, they live in conditions with really low water conductivity, which is an indicator that the mineral content is quite low, like almost nothing. That being said, they can tolerate moderate levels when it comes to GH and KH. Shoot for somewhere between 1 and 12. They probably wouldn't do well in really hard water. Ammonia should be at 0, same with nitrites. Nitrates, the typical 20 to 30 range. Flow, moderate to high. They do like to have some flow in their lives. When it comes to high-tech or low-tech systems, some species don't do well with lighting and fertilizers and CO2. Some dwarf rainbows and rasboras tend to do better in swampy tanks with tons of floating plants and murky lighting. Not when it comes to the Glowlight Danios. You can do either style tank and they should do just fine. Diet. Glowlight Danios are micropredators. That means that they primarily eat little crustaceans, worms, and other small aquatic critters. I feed mine a lot of meaty and frozen foods like mysis, daphnia, cyclops, as well as sinking pellets. They really love to pick away at those sinking pellets. Some fun live foods that they go crazy for are baby brine, grindleworms, and daphnia. Based on their natural habitat being mountainous streams without much vegetation, it seems likely that they would be eating a lot of aquatic invertebrate larvae. Regardless, they are not picky eaters. Just make sure to give them a good mixture of different foods, frozens, meaty stuff, flakes, pellets, all that stuff. I always make sure to drop the food towards the bottom of the tank, since that's where they feel comfortable coming out. As far as I can tell, the only thing they aren't interested in are veggies and algae. They love their protein. Glowlight Danios make an excellent addition to any community tank. They are an extremely easygoing and peaceful fish. The only catch is you need to keep them in decent numbers so they don't nip on other species. You could keep them with pretty much any small tetra, rasbora, danio, or barb. They'd even do well with some more boisterous fishes like rainbows or dwarf South American cichlids. I keep mine with cherry shrimp, and surprisingly, the danios don't seem to mess with their reproductive rate at all. I got tons of shrimp. It's not difficult to get Glowlight Danios to breed. Pretty much follow the guidelines that I've laid down for you here, and they'll likely spawn at some point. The hard part about breeding will be separating the offspring from the parents, because as soon as they hatch, those fry are fair game and on the menu. I see my Glowlights spawn all the time, but only a few times have I caught a glimpse of the fry, usually just long enough to see them get gobbled down by mom or dad. If you are really serious about breeding them, set up a separate tank with a sponge filter and a heater. Add the breeding pair to the tank and keep an eye on them. When you've noticed that they have laid eggs, go ahead and return the pair to the previous tank or another breeding tank if you want. The fry should be fed infusoria or live baby brine until they're large enough to accept flakes and other frozen foods. A couple things I've noticed is that adding some cooler water during a water change can trigger spawning. Be careful to keep it only slightly cooler, because too much difference in temperature can shock them. Adding a power head or pump to increase the flow can also help to set the mood for your little fish lovers. Well, thanks so much for watching. If you made it this far in the video, just go ahead and hit that like and subscribe button. You know how all of us YouTubers feel about that. I appreciate the support. Until next time, see ya!